The Universal Declaration of Human Rights was created in 1948. It was created from the United Nations as a way to aspire to do better, especially with everything that happened with World War II and before. It didn't really include much about Indigenous people. So thinking about sovereignty of nations, that Indigenous people have had a lot of people eradicate them. So in 2007, they created the declaration that related to Indigenous rights. They talk about how Indigenous people and individuals have the right not to be subjected to forced assimilation or destruction of their culture. Anyone who is of an Indigenous origin has the right to connect and reconnect with the community and should not be affected by others from saying you don't have that right. There's a lot of systems that are in play that prevents us from having an authentic relationship with that.
Mm-hmm.
What does it feel for you to have like systems either with federal laws or just with people who avoid having discussions about this to actually reconnect and understand what it means to be part of an Indigenous culture?
Well, the laws they really haven't affected me personally because, in the past, because I hadn't thought that much of it. As I've gotten older, I've thought of a lot of it, as far as my heritage and as a Cherokee and Chickasaw. And really, I don't think they've hampered me as far as being able to find out this information and being able to do it.
The intention of the Dawes Roll and the laws that were back there were to dilute people of Indigenous ancestry. And the more you dilute them, the more you can erase them. Because of the laws, they hid their Indigenousness.
Yes. And that would have gone clear back to Nanny's, as far as, how she was. I don't think she never talked about being part Cherokee or anything like that. That was something that was never brought up. Even my dad never talked about it much. Like on my dad's side, my grandmother, they don't talk about this, and they don't say, like, for my generation or your generation, unless you go in and you start researching. And the government should have brought that up years ago.
Were any of our family ever in the educational system that
I do not know. I know Nanny ended up going to teaching school. She became a teacher later on, early in her life. But that's as much as I know. I know my brother John and Blake were wanting to go back to Oklahoma and talk to some of the people. On my mom's side, I know they're Chickasaw, and we haven't did much study on that. And I'm not sure if it was on my grandmother's side or my grandfather's side as far as the Chickasaw come from. When you talk about my mom, she was embarrassed to go to school until my Uncle JT came home and bought her shoes to be able to go to school. It's just like we never spoke any kind of Cherokee or anything like this, which is a shame because, just think how much more we could have learned by doing that.
Why do you think it is that Nanny didn't do that, didn't speak that, didn't bring that forward?
I think a lot of it was of embarrassment. The way the people were back then, it was like, if you're part Indian or if you're part this, you should be embarrassed.
It can leave a residual effect where people aren't allowed to celebrate and connect.
Yeah. It's just, there's just a lot to it,
It could have come much sooner than now.
Well, but we know we should have gained sooner. You're right.
Yeah. Did you ever think about your dad as being Cherokee?
No, I never thought of that. All I knew is he was my dad, very quiet man and never, my dad never spanked me one time, but boy, I hate for him to talk to me. He was very quiet and stuff. And why he was quiet, I don't know. I think a lot of it was just stuff that he had experienced in life. When he turned 18, he enlisted into the Army, and he was on the tank, and he ended up in the 3rd armor position, which was under patent. And we figured on the timeline where if he went into boot camp with the tank training and stuff like that, he was over there during the blunt of the war, from probably the Battle of the Bulge on. And of course, he was several of the concentration camps. So I would imagine it would affect me. And I think as I've gotten older, I've looked back at that and I've go, man, that had to be terrible for how it would affect anybody to come across that, to see how people were treated like that. That's a shame. One of the things that we don't do until it's too late is talk to our parents or try to strike up conversation about, what it was like. But my dad was a very quiet person, and he never really talked, and as much as I wish he had. Same thing with my grandfather. I look back at things and I tell myself I wish I could have sat down and just like what we're doing, ask him these questions, because this is part of history we don't want to forget, because we learn from what we've gained, but we also learn from our mistakes. And the mistakes is something we don't want to redo again. We don't want to do this again and again, over and over.
What have you learned in this process?
I think the education part is just makes you more aware of what your ancestors had gone through, or what they, how bad it was back then. I've never thought about it as far as connection. I connect with, I just don't think about those things. I know just, if we talk about it, how, I probably don't do enough. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
I just, what you're doing is quite a bit, is a lot more. And I'm real proud for what you've done. You've taken the bull by the horns, and you're going to school and you're doing all this stuff. So trust me, I don't tell you enough, but yeah, I'm real proud of what you've done. And just like what we're doing right now is very important to me too, discussing these things.